efforts over many years to bring about a successful conclusion to the peace process in Northern Ireland and to establish the power-sharing assembly and executive in Northern Ireland. Now, of course, we are in a very difficult new situation. We have an overtly nationalist government in Edinburgh. We have a Labour administration in Cardiff Bay, a Conservative government in London, and sadly in Northern Ireland at the moment there is no executive or assembly functioning. We very much hope that that will change in the future. In my role, I have an overarching responsibility for constitutional affairs, including for devolution policy. I'm therefore working very closely with Alan, Karen and David week by week. We meet regularly as a team, and I try to get to all parts of the United Kingdom, not just to talk to ministers and political leaders from the three devolved parts of our union, but also to listen to what's being said by business leaders, by farmers and others in those communities, because I think it's really important for us as a party and as a government to assert the reality and the constitutional truth that in each part of the United Kingdom, the government of the United Kingdom is the legitimate elected government, and we work in partnership with the devolved administrations on those matters that fall to them under the various devolution statutes, but we should not be ashamed as a party or as a government about going out and making it clear that we are acting, taking decisions on behalf of people in every part of the UK. I mean, I've been around and I've talked to Airbus in North Wales, seen the amazing work that they are doing to bring skilled employment and economic growth to North Wales. When I have been to Aberdeen and I've talked to fishermen there about the opportunities that they see after we leave the EU to regenerate fishing communities. And I've been to Edinburgh and seen how the festivals there are an asset, not just for Scotland, yes, but for the whole of the United Kingdom. And, you know, I've been in Belfast, in Derry, Londonderry, in Newry, and talked to people from both traditions in Northern Ireland about their hopes and ambitions for the future. And it's been really encouraging in Northern Ireland, sometimes listen to business leaders who are determined to get on and create new opportunities for jobs and growth for people of all backgrounds in Northern Ireland, and just to work together and get on with that task. We are backed up, us on the platform, by a really talented team of ministers and PPSs, and I would like us just to recognise and say thank you to everyone in those teams. And Brandon, our party chairman, works in the Cabinet Office, but we're also backed up by Chloe Smith, Oliver Dowden, in the Cabinet Office by our PPSs, Kevin Foster, Luke Graham, Luke Hall, our Whip, Joe Churchill, and our Lord Spokesman, George Young. In Scotland and Northern Ireland, Ian Duncan does sterling work in the House of Lords, and I know Alberto Costa does a great job for David at his PPS. Alan is backed up by Nims Davies and Nick Bourne, and Shailesh Vara is, I know, the right-hand man for Karen in Northern Ireland. Can we say a very big thank you to all of our team? And what I'm going to do is come to each of my colleagues in turn, ask them to say a bit about the situation in each of their parts of the UK, and then we're going to have a discussion to explore some of the opportunities and challenges in greater detail. But I think the abiding principle we all want to bear in mind is that in our party, in our country, there is no contradiction for being proudly Scots or Welsh or Northern Irish, and also being a proud British member of the United Kingdom. We all bring... we all bring, every part of the United Kingdom brings huge assets to this collective endeavour that is our country. So I'm going to start with Alan. Perhaps Alan, you say a bit about state of affairs in Wales at the moment.
Well, thanks, David. And first I should probably rightly congratulate Paul Davies as the new leader of the Assembly group, the Conservative group in the Assembly yesterday, who made a great speech following Ruth Davidson, newly into the post, sort of hitting the ground running in holding Labour to account. So but he's also backed up by a great team. You've already mentioned Mims Davis and Lord Bourne and Glyn Davis, my PPS, but we'll also know that Byron Davis, our former colleague, is the chairman of the Welsh Party and backed up by a great team at CCHQ. So there is a great team effort in holding and challenging Labour to account, because there will also be change amongst all of the leaders of the political parties in Wales. There will be a new First Minister by the end of the year. Karen Jones is moving on, and the front runner is Mark Drakeford, someone that we meet on a regular basis, and he was one of the ones who was backing Jeremy Corbyn when Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet was resigning all around him. So he was one of the ones supporting him when he was the last man standing. So that demonstrates where politics in Wales may well go should Mark Drakeford be the winner. So we're likely to see a shift to the left as policies develop, but clearly it's only the Conservatives that can offer an alternative, and we will be working to put Paul Davies as First Minister as we approach the Assembly, next Assembly elections. But it's also important to recognise Andrew R.T. Davies for his excellent work over the time, and we'll all remember his famous quotes here on the platform and his great speeches in the past. So he's done a great job. But what I want to say, David, is that the Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street, you will remember, recognised the precious union, the special bond between all four nations of the UK. And that is a principle that we have followed through as we leave the European Union, that principle of the special bond of working with the devolved administrations in order to get to a Brexit that will work for every part of the country. Because we recognise that the union of the UK is more important now than ever before as we leave the European Union. And it's the union of the UK that has allowed us to bring a fair funding settlement to Wales, which is something that Labour ignored in their whole time in government. We're working on having and developing city and growth deals in every part of Wales, and also looking to the industries of the future, compound semiconductor in the south and the nuclear arc in the north, which will be on a cross-border basis, which will be a magnet for attracting investment, be that in small modular reactors or in new nuclear power stations. But you will also recognise, David, that as we negotiate our departure from the European Union, recognising the role of every nation in the UK is extremely important in that. And the Prime Minister has been focused on delivering a frictionless trading arrangements with the European Union. But of course in the UK, it isn't frictionless in every part, because we've had the 7 tolls for the last 50 years in South Wales, where lorries in January were paying £20 a time in order to cross the either of the 7 bridges, the Severn Bridge or the now Prince of Wales Bridge. And I'm delighted to announce that on the 17th of December this year, that this Conservative government will be abolishing the 7 tolls. So we will have frictionless trade between the southwest of England and between South Wales. This will be a major boost in the economy and a major part in binding the union of the UK, and a great opportunity for businesses on both sides to thrive and prosper, so that Wales can continue to be the fastest growing part of the UK.
Alan, thank you. Karen, Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, David. And can I start by thanking my team as well? I've got a fantastic team supporting me. My Minister of State, Shailesh Vara, and many congratulations, Shailesh, on becoming a Minister of State. It's fantastic news for all of us. Ian Duncan from the House of Lords, my Whip, Ian Stewart, and my PPS, Matt Warman. They're a great team, and without them, we couldn't do the work that we do for in Northern Ireland office, working on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland. Now, I'm going to start with a confession conference, which is that I wasn't here on Sunday, I'm afraid, because 2 days ago I was in Belfast at the National Police Memorial Day. It's a national event, it rotates around the country, and this year it was Belfast. And I have to say, I can't think of a more appropriate place to commemorate and celebrate the work of our police officers and the incredible work they do. It's their bravery and the sacrifice that they make on a daily basis that keeps us safe. And I was privileged to meet families, colleagues of those that gave their lives during the Troubles. They were murdered by terrorists on our streets in the United Kingdom, defending democracy and the rule of law, which we all believe in. And I think it served as a stark reminder, if any was ever needed, of the debt that we owe the police and the armed forces for the role they played in bringing about the peace process in Northern Ireland. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the place that we have today, we wouldn't have the peace that we see today, and our party will never, ever forget that. So it's thanks to their efforts and the efforts of political leaders that today Northern Ireland is a place transformed. And under this Conservative government, it is thriving. Unemployment at near record lows, employment close to record highs, and all driven by the private sector. Exports are rising, and Northern Ireland has proved itself to be a top destination for inward investment from companies based overseas and from within the UK. Just last week, I was in the United States and I met a number of businesses who are investing and creating highly skilled jobs in Northern Ireland. Tourism is also booming, with visitors enjoying Northern Ireland's stunning scenery, amazing hospitality and world-class attractions. This year alone, 112 cruise liners will visit Belfast, bringing tourists into Belfast and Northern Ireland in a way we've never seen before. And all of this is underpinned by the strength and security that Northern Ireland gains from membership of our precious union. And what we're seeing today is only a glimpse of the potential Northern Ireland has to offer. And to unlock that potential, what we need to see is a restoration of devolved government. It is a source of immense frustration that in the 20th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, we have no government instalment. And that's why my absolute priority is getting Stormont back to work. And last month, I announced a plan to help us get there. What was achieved 20 years ago was of such magnitude that we owe this to today and to future generations to make it work. And it's this Conservative government, along with this Secretary of State, who will not be found wanting on our efforts to deliver this. Thank you.
Karen, thank you. Karen, thank you. David, Scotland.
Well, thank you, David. Well, for me, it's great to be part of a team. For 12 years, I was a team of one, and now I have 12 Scottish Conservative MP colleagues. And I don't think that we can say enough that it was the gaining of those 12 seats in Scotland that made the difference between Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister or not. And we owe... So we owe a great debt of gratitude to those MPs and to the Scots that elected them. Yesterday, we heard a barnstorming, as ever, speech from Ruth Davidson, setting out why Scotland needs change and how the best way to deliver real change in Scotland is for Ruth to become the First Minister in 2021. And with my MP colleagues, and I'm sure colleagues right across the United Kingdom, we'll be doing everything that we can to ensure that the Scottish Conservatives can win that election. But there's something that needs to be done right now in Scotland, a change that needs to happen now and could happen today if Nicola Sturgeon was so minded. and that's to take the issue of a second independence referendum off the table.
Yeah.
4 years ago, we were told that the independence referendum would be a once-in-a-generation event. Yet every single day from the 18th of September 2014, we've heard about independence and about having another referendum. And what it's created in Scotland is a constitutional Groundhog Day. A Groundhog Day that is holding back our economy, stopping our Parliament focusing on schools and hospitals and on the issues that really matter. So I want to send a message today to Nicola Sturgeon. You could put an end to all of that. You could put an end to the uncertainty. You could stop the focus on constitutional issues in Scotland for the time being by simply saying that you are taking the threat of a second independence referendum off the table. And then we can move forward and focus on all the positive initiatives and working together, because contrary to what you would see in the media or sometimes read in the press, actually, and it's the same in the other devolved areas, that governments can work together. They do work together on a daily basis. That's what people in Scotland want to see. They want to see their two governments working together on issues like city deals, on building and strengthening our economy. I'm determined to drive that agenda forward, but there is an impediment, and it is this threat of a second independence referendum.
Thank you, David.
Well done.
Now, if perhaps we start to sort of probe some of the issues, great. And I think, Alan, if I can kind of come back to you first, of course, one of the defining features, I suppose, of Welsh identity, and actually we've seen growing, is the interest in the Welsh language, Welsh culture. And I think we as a party can say we've got a pretty proud record on what we've done to support and promote the Welsh language. But how important is this to you? How does this inform your policy priorities in the Wales Office?
Wel, chi'n gwybod gywir, David. Mae hwn yn blaenoriaeth. Mae hanes cryf gynnon ni yn cefnogi'r iaith Gymraeg. You're absolutely right, David. This is without doubt. I mean, as a Conservative party, we're proud about culture, we're proud about diversity, and we're proud about, clearly, issues like languages. And the Welsh language is something that is intrinsic, it's important, it's value, it's much about being Welsh, and even people in Wales who don't speak Welsh are still proud about the language. And the steps that we took back from Wyn Roberts, or Lord Roberts of Conway, now sadly not with us anymore, who persuaded Margaret Thatcher to establish S4C as a Welsh fourth channel, right the way through, I can say to you, David, and pay tribute to you, because you will know that we had the Welsh Grand Committee debate solely through Welsh and with translations in the House of Commons just in the last year. And that, you know, that we discussed that issue, and you recognise the priority of which of what it is to Wales and to people in Wales, and it was the right thing to do in the House of Commons to have that debate in the Welsh language. And as a result of these sorts of initiatives, as well as lots of work going on by the Welsh Government and by the Welsh Language Commissioner, we're now seeing the Welsh language grow from which is a very different place to where it was some years ago, where the decline seemed to be inevitable. But it's reversed, it's changed, and we're doing the right thing in supporting it because it's part of British and Welsh culture.
Absolutely. Thank you. Karen, on Northern Ireland, I mean, you made reference to the plan that you published recently to try to get devolution re-established. And I can remember, so it was my very first Parliament as a very new MP being called into John Major's office one evening along with a lot of other colleagues, and he explained that he had had this message via an intermediary from Sinn Féin IRA saying that the struggle is over, but the armed struggle is over, we need your help to bring it to a conclusion, which was, I suppose, the start of what became the peace process in Northern Ireland. I mean, perhaps could you say a bit more about the plan and how you want to take this forward?
Yes, of course, David. And you know, let's pay tribute to John Major for the role he played
Yes.
in really kicking off that peace process. There were so many people were involved, but I think John Major was there right at the beginning and made it possible. And there is no doubt that the best thing for the people of Northern Ireland and the best thing for the Union is having Northern Ireland elected politicians making decisions on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland. And devolution in Northern Ireland is not new. Northern Ireland has been devolved since Northern Ireland was created. This is not something that was concocted by Tony Blair. This was something that has been in place for many, many years. But what we've seen over the last 20 years is relative stability, where we have seen parties working together in a power-sharing arrangement, an extraordinary and unique power-sharing arrangement, the like of which we see nowhere else in the world. But unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have devolved government, and we know we want to get it back. I know there's a willingness from the parties to get it back together. I see Arlene Foster is here, and I know how much she wants to see devolved government back instalment. So what we're going to do is put in place some legislative measures that mean that it will be easier for the parties to come together, including changing the law so that the parties can reform the executive at any time. At the moment, they have to wait for legislation. We don't want that to be an impediment. We're going to change the law so that for a temporary period, there is no duty on the Secretary of State to call an election, because I don't think parties fighting an election and focusing on campaigning is the best way to bring the parties together to find an accommodation. And then we're going to work with the parties, as I have done tirelessly for the last few months, to find a way we can get the parties back in a room, building up trust so that they can come back in and do the right thing by the people of Northern Ireland. It is the best thing for the people of Northern Ireland, and I have to say it is the best thing for the Union if we have devolved government instalment.
Yeah. I mean, David, you made brief reference to growth deals. And of course, growth deals is an instrument of policy that we have as a party introduced and developed in England. It's having sort of good effects, as we can see, not least here in the West Midlands. But how do you plan to take that initiative forward in Scotland? And how in the context of this morning's discussion, how can something like the Growth Deal initiative help to support the Union?
I think the great thing about the growth deals that we've taken forward already in Scotland is that they are a demonstration that the governments can work together. On the ground, people can see the two governments coming together and making a real difference to the economy of a local area. We've had a very significant deal in Glasgow. We've had one in Inverness, in Aberdeen. We're about to go forward with the Tay Cities deal, as it's called, which will be Perth and Dundee areas. We've announced our interest in doing a deal in Moray in the north of Scotland and across in Ayrshire. And I shouldn't forget the Stirling and Clackmannanshire deal, which we announced during the course of this year, which was driven forward so much by our new MPs, Luke Graham and Stephen Kerr. And in the south of Scotland, we're going to pursue what will be a really groundbreaking opportunity, which we will combine with the north of England in a borderlands deal, recognising that that's a single economic area. As Alan was saying, we may have a geographic border, but Carlisle is an extremely important city for my constituents in southwest Scotland. Berwick is a very important town for people right across the south of Scotland. So we're recognising that that is a single economy coming together across that region to make a real difference for people there, but we're doing it by working together, Scottish Government, UK Government and local authorities.
Thank you. I mean, Karen, if perhaps just coming back on Northern Ireland, I mean, Northern Ireland has, despite the political difficulties, been continuing to do well economically. I know you were recently in the US trying to drum up further investment for Northern Ireland. I mean, what do you say to businesses? Do businesses elsewhere in the UK or globally still think of Northern Ireland a bit sort of through the prism of the history of the Troubles? Is there nervousness? Or what is it that you say to sell the case for investing in Northern Ireland, why it's a good place to do business?
Well, I think you're right, David, to say that there are some misconceptions and preconceptions about Northern Ireland that are simply wrong. Northern Ireland is a thriving, dynamic, energetic place. 50% of the population are aged 40 or under, and the skills that we're seeing from the great universities of Queen's and Ulster means that actually Northern Ireland can sell itself and does sell itself when people come and see it. And the investors I met in the US last week said it was once they came and recognised what there was on offer, it was a no-brainer. So I've been really lucky over the last few weeks to have been at a number of businesses announcing new jobs. StatSport in Newry, which is a fantastic organisation, fantastic business that makes they make data monitors for sports people. Now you might say, oh, you know, is that just a Fitbit? This is not a Fitbit. This is an extraordinary thing. And they are supplying 75% of the Premier League. They're supplying football in the United States, the RFU and Irish rugby. I did say to them, I wasn't very happy about the way they'd perhaps not supported England as much as the Irish, but obviously we support the Irish Rugby Union at Northern Ireland completely. But you know, they do fantastic work, and this is in Newry, where they are developing this global leader in data collection on sports, really enhancing elite sports. At PA Consulting, who has put their digital innovation hub, their global digital innovation hub, they've put it in Belfast. And I said to them, why? What's Belfast got? It's the people, it's the skills. They said that their first 10 people they interviewed, 8 of them they offered a job to. Now, anywhere where you can have an 80% hit rate, and it's the skills and the talent, and we have such depth and breadth of talent, it's absolutely fantastic to see. And, you know, as I say, Northern Ireland really does sell itself.
That's great. I mean, and sticking to the economic theme, Alan, you got a good reception here for what you just said about scrapping the tolls. I think all of us who have, paid tolls on the crossings will welcome that news today. But I suppose our critics will say, look, this is a gesture. How do you see this playing into what we want to see in terms of economic growth in South Wales?
Well, if you think that someone who, say you take the northwest of England and northeast Wales, people move seamlessly between Flintshire and Cheshire, and 25% of all employment in Flintshire comes from England. And that's the sort of free movement which strengthens East Wales and strengthens northwest of England, because that's the natural economic flow. You've got some of that already in southeast Wales, but if I said to you that someone who lived in southeast Wales and crossed the border to Bristol to work, or vice versa, they would spend about £1,500 a year of net income in crossing the tolls. A modest haulier, for example, that's on the Welsh side of the border, pays £500,000 a year in toll charges just to move between the two. So abolishing the tolls is the right thing to do. They've been there for 50 years. But I can also say there's a great excitement amongst the business organisations and businesses themselves, and communities and local authorities, the Forest of Dean and the West of England Mayor, for example, in creating this new economic region on the western side of the UK, be it the Great Western Powerhouse or the Sevenside Super Region. And that enables us then to balance the great strengths of the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands engine that we've got here. We all know about London and the South East, but obviously a powerhouse on the western side of the UK is important to the South Wales economy as well as to that of the southwest of England.
Thank you. I mean, David, could we go back? I mentioned fishing briefly, and there's no doubt, looking at those 2017 general election results in Scottish constituencies, that the fisheries policy seems to have been an influence on how people voted in that election. Looking forward, how can we craft the right policies to ensure that there are real growth opportunities for the fisheries sector in Scotland in the future?
I think, David, what's very important is being clear right up front. We are the party that will take Scotland and the rest of the UK out of the hated common fisheries policy. And that is something that we have to deliver on. as Ruth Davidson has said, even the most Remainer can't possibly argue that the common fisheries policy has been good for Scotland and the United Kingdom. And we have an opportunity now to become an independent coastal state, to make our own decisions and to take advantage of what's become known as the Sea of Opportunity. And that's what we need to deliver for those people who voted Scottish Conservative, because the alternative, and they keep it very well hidden in their press releases and in their statements, the Scottish National Party position is to take Scotland right back into the common fisheries policy. That is their position. They would sell out Scotland's fishermen in order to go back into the EU, and we can't ever let people in fishing communities around Scotland forget that. But there's huge opportunities, not just amongst the catchers, those people out bravely on the trawlers and bringing the fish home. There's huge opportunities in processing and marketing and real jobs that will be created in some of the most challenging economies in Scotland. So it's a real opportunity. We've got to grasp it. I believe both governments need to support it as well. There'll be need for infrastructure, for training, in order that we can take the maximum benefit from this. But it really is a great opportunity.
Thanks, David. Now, look, I'm very conscious. I've got a clock up here, which is telling me that our time is starting to get towards the end. I think if I can sort of say to my three colleagues, perhaps 2 minutes each to try and just sum up, but also if I can sort of put a question in doing so. I mean, Alan, sort of come to you first. You know, big changes in the leadership of a number of parties in Wales at the moment. What impact is that going to have, and where do you see the opportunities? What should the ambitions be for the Conservative Party in Wales?
Well, you're right. Wales is doing exceptionally well. Unemployment is lower than that of the UK average. Employment is at record highs. Cardiff is the fastest growing capital in the UK. So Wales is in a positive place, but clearly there is a lot more to do. And if we look to the leadership of the other parties, be that in Plaid Cymru, be that in Labour or the one Lib Dem that's left, and I should also say UKIP have been through 3 leaders this year alone. So it clearly we clearly see the change, but all of those parties don't have any plan, long-term economic plan or prospect to regenerate the economy. We've talked about city and growth deals in every part of Wales. I was in Aberystwyth last couple of weeks looking at the exciting prospect of a Spectrum Institute. In Swansea University, we've been looking at active homes. The Chancellor and I were visiting just some weeks ago. We got the compound semiconductor catapult in Cardiff and Newport, and that's working on a cross-border basis, absolutely, as is the nuclear arc in North Wales. So we have really exciting plans. But it's only a Conservative government and a Conservative administration that can deliver these issues. Wales can't do all of these things alone. It can do it because it's part of a united kingdom. Yeah. We're attracting investments like Aston Martin. We're attracting expansions at other major manufacturers around Wales. But this only happens because of the stable economy that we create and the clear will and demand for a frictionless trading arrangement with the European Union. And I'm excited about that future. So as they will carry on arguing in a similar basis as we see in Scotland about constitutional change, we just want to create the business, the stability, the opportunity and the freedom in order to succeed on our behalf.
Thanks. Thank you. I mean, Karen, in summing up, you also just touch on, how does Northern Ireland benefit from being part of the United Kingdom in your view? And also, what is it that, as Secretary of State now, you see Northern Ireland bringing that enriches the UK as a whole?
Yeah, well, The United Kingdom is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We are not united without Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. And I am determined as Secretary of State that we do everything we can to demonstrate to people in Northern Ireland why being part of the United Kingdom is the best thing for them. It's great institutions like the NHS. Free at the point of delivery and point of need healthcare is something that is not enjoyed by many people in the world, and the people of Northern Ireland get to benefit from it by being part of the United Kingdom. Institutions like the BBC, which deliver great things. The last night of the proms on the slipway at Titanic is a fantastic institution and really shows off how wonderful Northern Ireland is and the great opportunities for people to come and visit. The fact that Northern Ireland will be hosting the British Open next year, the first time that the golf has been in Northern Ireland for many a good year, really an opportunity to show off that northwest coastline with the incredible beaches and wonderful tourist attractions like the Giant's Causeway. So I think Northern Ireland really benefits from being part of the world's 5th biggest economy, with the opportunities for trade deals to be struck globally, but that frictionless trade at the border, and being part of the United Kingdom. And I want to be absolutely clear, this government will never allow there to be any breakup of the United Kingdom with a border down the Irish Sea.
And David, I mean, I can remember both at the 2017 general election and in the Holyrood election, a couple of years before, watching the results coming in. And I thought for a time that we'd renamed our party in Scotland. Instead of being the Scottish Conservative Party, we were now the Resurgent Scottish Conservative Party, because that seemed to be built into the description. And it's been a remarkable turnaround, as you said earlier. How's that been done? Where do we take it next?
Well, in fact, of course, David, the name is Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
Yes, yes.
And that...
That's it.
That is the key to our success, because we are the one party in Scotland that will stand up for Scotland's place in our United Kingdom. And that's what we will continue to do, both with our 13 powerful advocates at Westminster, with our 31 MSPs holding Nicola Sturgeon to account. And it remains a vitally important job, because only last week, when Jeremy Corbyn visited Scotland, he couldn't tell us whether or not he would agree to another independence referendum in Scotland. So it's quite clear for voters in Scotland, if they want to ensure a commitment to the Union, to ensure that we say now is not the time for another independence referendum, it is the Scottish Conservative Party that can deliver on that. But as Ruth set out yesterday, as we move forward with our aspiration to become the government of Scotland, for Ruth to be the First Minister of Scotland, that will mean that we'll be setting out a policy platform in order to demonstrate to the people of Scotland what we can deliver, not just in terms of standing up for the Union, but on the day-to-day issues that are so important to them, of schools and hospitals and transport.
Yes. Thank you, David. What you've seen on the platform today is a team. The four of us meet as a team roughly every fortnight, usually in my office, and just talk through the issues affecting the three devolved areas of the UK and how UK policy more broadly plays into the political debate in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And I think it is really important as a government that we mainstream thinking about the Union and every part of the Union in the policy making and in the policy implementation of every department of government, not just in those with specific constitutional responsibilities. That is something that the Prime Minister is absolutely determined to do, and we will be taking forward that discussion. We'll be having a cabinet-level discussion about the Union a little bit later on this year. But I think in thanking my three colleagues for their contribution this morning, indeed thanking yourselves for coming to this session and listening, let us all go out from this hall renewed in our belief about the value that the Union brings to people, to families, to businesses in each of our 4 nations. We are, all of us, stronger from being part of that union. There are parties, there are political leaders who would either walk away from that union altogether and follow the path of separation, or those whose track record is of, at best, indifference, at best, scepticism and hostility towards that union of 4 nations. Let us be absolutely clear and determined in what we say and what we do, that we value that constitutional union of the United Kingdom, and it will remain central to our party's commitment and our party's beliefs that we will continue to defend, uphold and strengthen the union. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce the next panel of speakers who will be discussing the role of women in the Conservative Party as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of some women gaining the right to vote. We all know that our party has a strong track record, electing the first sitting female MP, the first and second female Prime Minister. We also have a female leader of the Scottish Conservatives, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Those of you who were present at the National Convention meeting on Sunday will have heard me discussing the role of women in our party. Slightly under 30% of the members of the National Convention are women, 21% of our MPs are women, but this summer the chairman set a target for 50% of our candidates to be women in future. So to discuss how we empower women at all levels of our party, please welcome our panel. The Minister for Women, Vicky Atkins, Helen Whately MP, Vice Chair for Women, Nikki Aiken, Leader of Westminster Council, and the leaders of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, Andrea Leadsom and Baroness Evans. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before I let these 4 brilliant women introduce themselves, I just want to set the scene a little bit. I am number 336. Vicky Atkins is number 428. And Helen Whately is number 442. So you might be wondering what on earth I'm talking about. Well, to date, in the United Kingdom, there have been 442 female MPs ever. And to put that in perspective, today, just today, there are exactly 442 male MPs in this Parliament. An extraordinary coincidence, don't you think? So it's fair to say we've a way to go before the 50% of the population catches up with the other 50%. But on the other hand, we do have a lot to be proud of. Today, the President of the Supreme Court is a woman. The head of the Metropolitan Police is a woman. We have our first ever female black rod in Parliament. Both the leaders of the Commons and the leader of the Lords are women, and the first female Bishop of London was appointed at the end of last year. And lastly, and so important to us in this room, it is we, the Conservative Party, who have elected not 1, but 2 female leaders. Exactly. Good for us. And each of them became Prime Minister at a critical time for our country. So we do have much to be proud of. And what better time to take stock of this than in the year we celebrate the centenary of women's suffrage? 2018 hasn't just been a celebration of some women winning the right to vote, it's also 100 years since women were first elected as MPs and 60 years since the first women sat in the Lords. It was 151 years ago that the Conservative Party held its first ever conference right here in Birmingham. Back then, you wouldn't have found women in this conference hall debating policy and politics. but you may well have found them doing exactly that in tea rooms right across the country. For the suffrage campaigners, taking tea was a radical act, a chance to plot, and it was their refusal to accept the status quo and their hard work and determination that in the end won them the vote. And it's their inspiration that's brought us to where we are today. So we 5 women in public life want to give you a bit of insight into what it means to us to directly serve your country through the democratic process. So Natalie Evans, Leader of the Lords, Nikki Aiken, Leader of Westminster City Council, Vicky Atkins, Minister in the Home Office, and Helen Waitley, Vice Chairman of the party, each of these women has her own inspiring journey into public life, and I want to let you all hear from them, starting with Nat. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, I have to confess, mine was a somewhat unexpected journey into public life. Unlike my fellow panellists here, I didn't stand for election. I got a random phone call in the summer of 2014, completely unexpected, from David Cameron, asking me if I would consider becoming a Conservative peer, something I had never, ever in my life conceived could ever happen to me. So after a bit of mumbling and spluttering, I managed to get the word yes out, and everything sort of flowed from there. I had roles which had a public profile. I ran a charity called New Schools Network, which helped people set up free schools. I was deputy director of a think tank, so I had a bit of experience in terms of jobs that had a bit of a profile. But nothing prepared me for walking into the Lords for the first time in October 2014, a woman where most of my new colleagues were twice my age. As I say, I threw myself into it. It was a fantastic opportunity that I never expected. I kept on with my outside job when I first went into the Lords, as a lot of people there do. But when we won the election in 2015, I was made a government whip. So I joined the government then. And then another highly unexpected event happened in the summer of 2016 when I got called into Downing Street and asked to become Leader of the House of Lords. A fantastic honour, but very quick move for me from joining the Lords at the end of 2014 to suddenly becoming its leader, and not potentially a leader that I think most people would expect for the House of Lords. Having said that, it's a fantastic job. I absolutely love it, and I'm very honoured to be able to have been asked to do it.
Thank you. Vicky, you are the daughter of a politician, and you had a slightly different journey. Can you tell us about it?
Well, good morning, conference. And I sit here because my parents met at Conservative Party conference. So if anyone has started a romance this week, then good luck. You may have met the one. My previous career, I prosecuted criminals for a living. And in my early days as a barrister, I was sent to a youth court to represent a 12-year-old boy who was in court for the first time. And I arrived there, he was by himself, and I asked him where his mum or dad were. And he looked at me and he said, "I've never known my dad, and my mum will be flat out drunk on the floor by now." It was 9:30 in the morning, and I vowed then that one day I would do something to help boys like him, children like him. So fast forward to the expenses scandal, and David Cameron reopened the candidates list. And my husband turned to me and said, "For goodness sake, put your name forward, because I am fed up of you shouting at the television whenever Gordon Brown comes on." So I did, and fast forward to 2015, I'm elected to the House of Commons, the 428th woman, as Andrea has said, and I now have the huge honour of having been asked by the Prime Minister to be Minister for Women, but also Minister for Crime, Safeguarding and Vulnerability, which means I really am helping boys and children like that 12-year-old I represented in a youth court all those years ago.
Well done. Nikki, you're leading one of our most significant councils, Westminster City Council. Fabulous. Tell us about how you got into that.
Well, through the Conservative Party, when I was 19 years of age, I went to university, and the first week of university, I met a young man called Robert Halfon, who said, "You're a Conservative, you should join the Conservative Party." So I joined the University Conservative Association, and along the way met some fantastic men and women, but Sajid Javid and Tim Montgomery and David Burrows and Robert all really supported me and really encouraged me to continue to get involved in the Conservative Party. And I did. And I came to London and I joined the Two Cities Association. And then life events took over and I had children and I was sitting at home on maternity leave, quite often listening to Woman's Hour, thinking, I can do better than, I've got to be able to do better than many of the stories that we're hearing on Woman's Hour and in the news. So I decided to stand for election for the Conservative Party. I got elected when I was 7 months pregnant with a toddler, which was not part of the plan, but you know, life gets in the way sometimes. But you know, I've never found my life to get in the way of politics. It's part of your life, isn't it? And so part of Westminster City Council, and I've worked my way up. Again, I've never had anything but support from the Conservative Party. I really do believe that we are the party of equality. I am the 3rd female leader in Westminster. I replaced a woman and who went to the Lords, and you know, we've had 2nd female Prime Minister. The Conservative Party doesn't talk about equality, we just get on and do it.
Yeah. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. And Helen, you are Vice Chairman in the party with responsibility for getting more women into politics. Can you tell us about your journey and what you think the party is doing to help more women get in?
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't come from a political family. I came from a family of doctors. And my childhood memories involve sitting around talking about the NHS and a lot about what was wrong with the NHS. So as a teenager, I decided I wanted to fix the NHS. I was very interested in healthcare. I began my career, though, in business, then moved into healthcare, and in parallel was doing some local campaigning because I was interested in politics. There was a watershed moment, which was when I was on honeymoon. And a few days in, had some time to think. It was the first time for a few years, really busy life, working, campaigning. Had a moment, and I thought, you know what? I think I want to stand for Parliament. I think I want to be an MP. And my husband, my new husband, a few days in, he sort of came back from what he'd been doing. I said, we have a chat. I said, I think I want to stand for Parliament. Some might say I could have had that conversation a few days earlier before we were married. Anyway, luckily, he's hugely supportive, and that definitely makes a difference. Another thing that I think I was very fortunate was around that time, the Prime Minister and Baroness Jenkins had just founded Women to Win. Yeah. And I went and had a conversation with Anne Jenkin, and Women to Win has been a huge support to me, along with CWO, the Conservative Women's Organisation. And that is just growing and growing, the amount of support there is for women who want to stand. Women have all sorts of barriers. We want to only do it if we're going to be absolutely brilliant. We struggle sometimes with our confidence. There is a huge amount of support to help you make that journey, which I know I certainly benefited from. A great network of women who stick up for each other. Vicky and I have done a certain amount of the journey together. I stood in a marginal seat in 2010 and then was selected to stand in Faversham in 2015. And it is the most rewarding job I could possibly imagine.
Good. Good. Vicky, what do you think you've done that's made a difference in politics? What's been the most worthwhile thing for you?
Well, at the moment, I'm taking through a piece of legislation, the Offensive Weapons Bill, which is part of our national strategy to tackle the scourge of serious violence in our market towns, our cities and our countryside. So that's a real privilege to be able to take a piece of legislation through that you know will be giving the police the powers they've asked for and will be helping to keep communities safe. But there's a piece of legislation coming up that I'm going to be taking through called the Draft Domestic Abuse Bill. And this is a personal priority for the Prime Minister. She put it into the Queen's speech last time. And this is a huge piece of domestic legislation that will make a real difference to people who are suffering abuse in their home, a place where we should all be loved and cared for. And I think that being able to do that, being able to help women and people like that in those situations is just such a privilege. And it's why being a Member of Parliament is such an amazing job.
Yeah, fantastic. Nat, how do you think you make a difference?
Well, I mean, obviously, a key role, as you will know for us, is getting our legislation through, making sure that the government's agenda, which is obviously to improve the lives of everyone in our country, gets through. But I guess from my perspective, thinking back in terms of my career, as I mentioned, I ran a charity called New Schools Network, which helped people set up free schools, following on from another fantastic woman, Rachel Wolfe. In 2010, there were no free schools. We brought in the policy under the coalition government. Fast forward 4 years, I remember going to a reception that David Cameron hosted in Lancaster House. Hundreds of parents, teachers, community groups there, people who, thanks to the policies that we brought forward, had improved children's lives by setting up fantastic new schools. And while I didn't do it personally, our charity helped the vast majority of them set them up. And I think on that day, when it would have been an empty room 4 years before, all these people there over the moon and thrilled that they've been able to make a difference to children's lives. And I think on that day I thought, God, actually we can make a difference, we really can.
Yeah, fantastic. Two very different areas. Helen, can you give us an example of how does being a politician help you to make a difference?
I mean, one thing you'll know as a constituency MP is that day in, day out, you're helping your constituents with individual issues they come to you about. The particular area that I work on nationally and have worked on over the last few years is mental health. And there's an enormous amount of support from the government on improving the mental health care we provide. One area that I've worked on is making sure that there's mental health services in every A&E. When I first became an MP, that wasn't the case, and now it is being rolled out across the country. Another is student mental health, and that's an area I did a bunch of campaigning on a few months ago, calling for a greater focus on student mental health. And now the Universities Minister is really making that a priority, getting university vice-chancellors to talk about mental health, to take responsibility for it. And we are seeing a real change in policy and what is happening for students. And that's making a difference to students' lives.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Nikki, do you think it matters if there's more women in public life? What difference will it make if we can achieve a 50-50 parliament?
I think it's absolutely imperative. We are half the population, and therefore we have to represent half that population. And I think, you know, we come at it with different experience, different life experience. We give birth, we juggle, we have jobs, we have then work in public life. And I think, you know, if we don't have that mix and that rich mix of women from all walks of life, from every echelon, we have to make sure that they do that. And I think, you know, we do come from different experiences. You know, we have to juggle that childcare. Whatever we think, it's usually the women who, because of our maternal guilt, I think, more than anything else, I think, you know, we have to realise that. And again, things like the menopause. We have to talk about that M word, I'm afraid, Andrea, because there are women we are living longer, and we are, you know, experiencing things like menopause when we're in the middle of our working lives and our political lives. And if we don't talk about it and ensure that organisations and our businesses and everything like that doesn't take that into account, then we are letting women down.
Yeah. So talking about women's experiences, a very key reason to get more women into public life. Vicky, what's your perspective on that? Do you think we need more women?
Very much so. I mean, this year we have had the first gender pay gap reporting, which is extraordinary. I mean, this really is world leading, and I don't think we, you know, talk about it enough and frankly pat ourselves on the back about it enough, because for the first time ever, the largest employers, 10,000 employers across the country, were having conversations in their boardrooms about how they pay their female members of staff and how they treat them. And this is extra. I mean, we know that other companies across the world are watching what we're doing on this. And that is, I'm convinced, because we have the experiences of Theresa May, of Nicky Morgan, of Justine Greening, of the many, many ministers for women and equalities who have, frankly, laid the path for this legislation. So it's been an absolute pleasure to help them deliver what we want, which is making a real difference to women's lives in the workplace.
That's brilliant. Let's hear what the Prime Minister has to say about getting more women into public life.
As we mark 100 years since some women achieved the vote in Britain, we should remember the women who got us here and the debt we owe them. The best way we can do that is by ensuring that we encourage more women to come into public life. Women make up half the population of this country, yet only a third of MPs. Although I am proud to serve in a parliament with more women MPs than ever before, we still need to make much more progress as a country and as a party. Those who fought to establish their right, my right, every woman's right, to vote in elections, to stand for office, and to take their full and rightful place in public life, did so in the face of fierce opposition. They persevered, in spite of all danger and discouragement, because they knew their cause was right. As the woman at the head of our country's government, a century after my grandmothers were first given the right to vote, my mission is clear: to provide a stronger, fairer country with real opportunity for people who work hard and do the right thing. That is why I am asking you to apply to become a Conservative candidate. Or if you know someone who would make a good MP or councillor, ask her to stand. Help us build that better future for all our people, a democracy where every voice is heard.
Well said, Prime Minister. We all agree with you. We're all asking her to stand the whole time, and we're asking all of you to think about it too. But quite interestingly, recently, Harriet Harman was on Women's Hour talking about how now that there are many more Conservative women MPs, there's much more of a sisterhood in Parliament. What do you think, Nat?
Well, certainly, as someone, as I said, when I became leader, I was the youngest woman in the Lords, and the vast majority of my colleagues across the House were somewhat older men, shall we say. But to be fair, they've all been really great about accepting me. I've never had any problem with that. I guess I'm a bit of a different face, and I think they're finally getting used to me. But what I definitely did find was women across all parties actually giving me a lot of support, because as I said, I didn't come through the routes that I guess you guys did. It sort of was thrust upon me in a way. And so I must admit, I did find, you know, some of my Labour colleagues whispering behind doors, don't tell anyone, but you did really well there. And that sort of stuff, which does give you confidence and a boost, because when you're sitting at that dispatch or standing at that dispatch watching, they're all just shaking their heads and doing this, and you think, oh my God, what is going on here? This is awful. And actually, it's all a bit of a game. But I certainly think I've had a lot of support from across the House. I don't know if you've had a similar experience as leader in the Commons.
Well, actually, I think the interesting thing that people don't realise quite often when they watch the Prime Minister's questions every Wednesday lunchtime, that there is quite a lot of camaraderie across party in the House of Commons anyway. So women and men, but certainly women and women. So in the Commons as leader, I often get women and men from the Scottish Nationalists, from the Labour Party, from the Lib Dems, who want to raise particular issues with me, legislation they want to get through, issues they want to resolve in Parliament, and my door is always open, so I do actually have some good, strong relationships. But in terms of the sisterhood, I think some of the things that I'm focused on in Parliament is facilitating more women who, for example, are heavily pregnant. So in this recent session, we had 4 pregnant women who've now all had their babies, safely delivered, I'm happy to say, and several men who have recently become fathers. And so for me, a priority that I'm working cross-party on is to introduce proxy voting for people on baby leave, which will enable them to have their vote count even though they are taking valuable time off to be with their new baby. And that's something you might think, well, what's the point of that? We have a pairing system. The point is we want more and younger people to come into Parliament and to feel that they're made welcome, that their life is able to continue, and that their constituents are not being effectively disenfranchised whilst they do the things that people do, such as having a family. So I think actually the sisterhood has had that effect in that there are more diverse people coming into Parliament who have diverse needs, and we're determined to accommodate them. So I'm quite pleased about the progress we're making. What do you think, Helen? Do you think we're having a good sisterhood?
I think there is really good support across parties, and there are definitely issues that we come together on and work. It may be more often behind the scenes than openly visible, but absolutely there is a strong camaraderie amongst women in politics.
And I think our generation of men are also very supportive, and I think we do have to give a shout out to our husbands and our partners as well. We do.
Absolutely.
I could not do my job without my husband's backing, and he's at home looking after my 2 children. I spoke to my son this morning. He said, "When are you coming home?" I said, "Tomorrow." I said, "Are you missing me?" He said, "I'm missing your organisation."
Did he change nappies, your husband?
He did change nappies, absolutely.
Good to hear. So on that subject, Vicky, you have Monty.
I do.
Can you tell us, how does he like politics?
So Monty thinks it's completely normal to spend your Saturday morning knocking on doors asking for people's votes. Indeed, in last year's election, he'd come racing down and say, "Mummy, Mummy, are we going to win some votes today?" He's, you know, I've wanted very much to include him in this lifestyle, because this is a vocation, it's not a job. And one of my fondest memories is when he was a bit smaller, he was at nursery, and on a Wednesday morning, I'd take him into the chamber to put my prayer card in to reserve my seat for PMQs. And the doorkeepers were generally okay about this until one day when Monty, toddling along with his prayer card, went and tried to put it into the Prime Minister's seat. And Monty the doorkeeper, for there is a Monty the doorkeeper, had to, you know, draw the line there. Fair enough.
Fantastic. Helen, when George was little, I think he got you into some trouble. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, certainly. So my children now are 6, 8 and 10, but when I first stood for Parliament, actually I had my first child, George, while I was campaigning during the election. And I have one memory of campaigning when he was a toddler. He was just learning to walk, and I was knocking on doors in a block of flats, and knocked on the first door in a sort of corridor and started talking. I started talking to the person at the door. But meanwhile, George got a bit bored. So he started toddling along the corridor, and he knocked on every single door in his corridor. So there I was, and all the doors opened at once, and all these people came out and were all quite annoyed that they'd been disturbed. But one thing I will say is I think it is a really good job. Being a member of Parliament is a really good job for a parent. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of dads, and there are quite a few mums in Parliament, and I think you really can make it work.
Yeah. Completely agree with you. And our lovely colleague Ruth Davidson, who of course is imminently expecting, and she made the point that she worries not so much about what the baby does to her job as what her job does to her baby. And I can tell you my own little story of my 14-year-old daughter, who now dines off the fact that I went to a selection meeting the day she was born. So she was born 2:30 in the morning, and she attended her first political meeting the day she was born. She loves that story now. I think everyone thought I was mad at the time, but, you know, there it is. It all works. It's all fine. Really, you need to do this. Anyway, let's change the subject a bit. We did see a huge rise in online abuse, and we're seeing an awful lot of problems with social media, with trolling, with candidates and campaigners being abused in the streets and online by the keyboard warriors. Nikki, have you found that's a particular problem for you?
Yes, I've come off Twitter because I found it just really offensive, and it's the hidden bullying that I can't bear. Yeah. And there was a parody. Twitter called it a parody account of mine. It was somebody pretending to be me, and was being quite disgusting. And when I went to Twitter, it was the shrug shoulder attitude. It was like, oh well, you know, it's meant to be amusing. I didn't find it amusing. I found it abusive. And the fact that Twitter would do nothing about it, I think they've got to stand up now. They've got to step up to the plate, and they've got to do something about this, because it shouldn't. Women and men should not be putting up with this hidden bullying. But I've been off it now for a couple of months, and I haven't missed it. I have not missed it. I do not miss anything. I'm still on Facebook and Instagram, but Twitter, until they change their ways, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
No, I think that's very sound. Helen, I think you have a slightly different perspective on it.
I do. I mean, I am on Twitter. There is some abuse on it. I generally don't I don't spend very much time reading the abusive stuff. I make sure that I never look at my Twitter after 10 o'clock in the evening, so I have quite a strict, some strict rules. But also what I think, the abuse is not okay. It is absolutely not okay, and we should not accept it. And I am concerned that it is putting people off getting involved and stepping up, and we need women to step up and stand for election. But I will say is there's also a balance, because for every abusive comment you get on Twitter from somebody that you've never met, has never met you, might not even live in this country, sending some abusive comment late at night, we all have emails and letters and cards from people who've thanked us. All those things saying, thank you for what you've done for me. You've changed my life. Thank you for speaking up about something that I really care about. And that's not visible to the public, but we have that stock to balance the abuses, actually people saying thanks. And I find that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It is important to remember that all of us as, well, the three of us as constituency MPs, we do have that amazing privilege of having this little, almost a magic wand where you get somebody who comes to your surgery and who has potentially years of problems that they've been unable to resolve on their own. And they come to you as an absolute last resort, and the enormous privilege of being able to unravel it for them. It does feel sometimes as if that House of Commons letterhead is just like magic stardust. You know, you write to people, you say, you know, you've got to sort this out, this is not good enough, and it gets sorted out. And I certainly, I'm sure you have too, have received letters from people saying, you have literally saved my life. I do remember a particular story of a young couple who were refugees to this country who had a young son, and they had problems with their visas, and their passports had been taken and not returned in time, and both as a result lost their jobs, and as a result of that they'd lost their home. They were literally living in their car with their young son, and it was close to Christmas, and just the amazing privilege of being able to unravel that, get action, and get them into housing in time for Christmas was one of the best achievements, I think, of my political career. Often the things that go unnoticed and certainly unremarked, but to this day I'm still delighted to have been able to help them. I wonder if you have a story that you want to share with us, Vicky.
Yes, I have a constituent who is caught up in the contaminated blood scandal, and this gentleman has, every part of his life has been affected by the fact that as a haemophiliac in the 70s and 80s, he was given contaminated blood. And he contacted me and he said to me when he came through the doors, look, I've never voted Conservative in my life, I don't expect you to be able to help me. And I said, no, just wait, let's see what we can do. And we had a really powerful debate in the House of Commons about a year ago where I told his story in the chamber. And he was watching at home, and I think just having the power, the ability to tell his story on the national stage, and then for the government to react as positively as we have done to right the injustices of that scandal, I hope it has given him a modicum of comfort in what has been a very, very difficult journey for him.
Yeah.
I remember something very similar when I met, because obviously local government, we are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. And I had met a young girl who had been in the care system all her life. She had had a baby at 16, which we'd had to take into care ourselves because she couldn't cope. She then went off, and because of that, she got into drugs and she got HIV. And then she got pregnant with twins. But she was in a relationship then, and with our Westminster Social Services, we worked with her, and I met with her when the babies were quite small, and she was so impressive. She'd really learned, and she said to me, you know, you were right to take the baby away from me at 16, but now I'm ready. And then a couple of years later, I saw her. I was in Tesco's doing some shopping, and I saw her, and she had toddlers, and one of them was having one of those toddler meltdowns, which, you know, we've all been there. And I watched. She didn't see me, and I watched to see how she coped. And she was stunning. She was brilliant. She looked after this little boy, and she really knew what to do. And I went up to her and said, "You won't remember me, but I met you." And I said, "You did a fantastic job. I personally would never have coped with like you did. I would have just grabbed him and just, you know." But and I think that just shows what local government, national government can do. We are working with some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and we know we can make a huge change.
And I think part of
of it as well is us actually getting out and telling these stories. We all know it happens. We know what we do on a day-to-day basis. But I think also to encourage people to get more involved and to step up in public life is to tell these stories that we can make a difference and we can change things. People see all the negative side and all the horrible things we do and all of that sort of things. But actually, as we've all talked about and hopefully everyone here's heard, it's an incredibly rewarding job. And we just need to get the message out of all of that side of things, because I think that will be another big key to helping and encouraging more people from a whole range of backgrounds to come forward.
Hear, hear. Nat, you and I have a huge amount of legislative programme to get through still. Do you want to tell us what's been your best piece of legislation so far? Or you could tell us your worst. Talk us through some of the challenges that are unique to the business managers.
Well, I think getting any legislation through the House of Lords I consider an immense achievement with the numbers that we have. I guess from my perspective, obviously, with the Brexit legislation that we've been dealing with, as you and I know, the hours we've been doing it, we have had defeats along the way, but I think we have got both the Article 50 bill through and the EU withdrawal bill through in a state that we all wanted it to be. There were a lot of battles, a lot of in-depth discussions, a lot of robust scrutiny, but we did it. So I think in the big picture, it's a privilege to be in there, but also at this particular point in our country's history, is kind of adds a bit of extra pressure, I'd suggest, on our shoulders. But as Vicky was saying, what we've also got is a lot of domestic legislation, a lot of very important things we are putting through to improve people's lives, and that is a great honour to be able to help to navigate. And within the Lords, we do work a bit differently. We don't have a lot of the sort of timetabling tools and those sorts of things that they have in the Commons. So actually we have to work much more collaboratively across the parties in order to get anything done. So I've enjoyed that side of things as well, because although we might shout at each other across the dispatch box, generally we get on all right behind the scenes.
Exactly right. There's a lot more collaboration than you'd think if you just watch on a Wednesday lunchtime. The Prime Minister tends to get the worst of it, doesn't she? But I think she's doing a great job. Just in the Commons, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is some of the work on private members' bills, which are bills brought forward by backbenchers. And I can say that I've enjoyed working with Vicky on the Assaults on Emergency Workers bill, which was a private members' bill brought forward by Chris Bryant, who is the Labour member for Rhondda, who gives me some serious grief on a Thursday morning at Business Question, I can tell you that. But actually on this bill, we were proud to collaborate with a Labour backbencher, effectively to make it a specific criminal offence to attack an emergency worker. Absolutely appalling the way you see, people who are ambulance workers or a police officer or a member of nursing staff who get spat at and abused by the very people that they're trying to help. So to make it a specific offence was a really great piece of progress. And so sometimes you really can work cross-party to get things done, which are to the good of all of our society. So we've talked a lot about what it is we do. Helen, do you want to just give us a bit more of a pitch for getting more women into public life? I think we've given you a flavour of how wonderful it is for all of us. You're seeing us smiling, aren't you? We are smiling. We're enjoying it. But Helen, what's your pitch as the Vice Chairman for Women?
So my pitch, I think women and men get involved in public life and politics because they want to make a difference. You really, really can do it. It's an amazingly rewarding job. The difference you make to people's lives, big and small. We've heard the individual examples and also the big legislation that affects the lives of so many people. So you can make a difference. Also, there is a huge amount of support for women to take the journey between the moment when they think maybe I might want to do this and getting all the way to being elected as a councillor or as a member of parliament. But what we do hear quite often is that women take a little while to get going. And so, for example, if a man is given the application form to stand for Parliament, on average, they get it in within about 48 hours of seeing the form. Women tend to take several, 8 or 9 months, can take the best part of a year. And they take so much longer. And the problem is that the clock is ticking, and we have a tendency to wait until we know that we are going to be brilliant at doing that job. And actually, you learn on the job. So, you know, one of my big pieces of advice to people is just, you know, to get on with it, to come forward, because it really is worth it. It really is worth it. You know, seize the moment and come up here and join us.
Yeah, absolutely. Nikki, how about in government, local government and councillors? What would you like to see from women?
I want to see more women stand. I think we need to see more women in public life. They can start off by becoming a school governor. Join an NHS trust. You can start small and then think about joining the Conservative Party and becoming a local councillor standing for Parliament. There's so many different opportunities out there, and I would just say, just do it.
Just get on with it.
Just get on with it.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Nat, how about becoming a baroness? Would you advise anyone here to take on that mantle? Should we all be ringing David Cameron? What about me?
well, what I would say is, if something unexpected comes your way, go for it. I mean, to be fair, if you get that phone call, you don't have very long to make up your mind, and as long as you can get the words yes spluttered out, you'll be fine. But, you know, for me, it was entirely unexpected what happened, and I guess at that point in time, we're like, you've just got to go for it. And if something comes your way and you think, you know, don't doubt yourself. If I can do it, believe you me, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Good.
So we just have a couple of minutes left, and I'm just going to ask my wonderful colleagues, what piece of advice would you give to anyone, woman or man, on thinking about going into public life? What would be your advice to them, Nikki?
Believe in yourself, you can do it. If this Cardiff comprehensive girl can become the leader of Westminster City Council, then nothing should stop you from trying to do your best and stand for public life, whether, as I said, it's as a school governor or a councillor or an MP. The only barrier that you're facing is yourself. And I am a great example of how the Conservative Party empowers everybody from all walks of life to reach the best goals that they can reach.
Thank you. Vicky.
I think if we've tweaked your interest in standing in public life, whether at local or national level, have a think about what motivates you. Is it your local hospital, making sure that the healthcare system is working? Is it schooling, wanting to get a better education for your children and for the wider community? Is it about ensuring that we have the best possible people representing our country and our local communities? Work out what your motivation is and then go for it. Don't let anyone tell you that your motivation is not valid or not enough. Just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Helen, your advice.
Well, very practically, if you're here at conference and you think, I'd like to stand for election at some level, go to the candidate stand, the CCHQ stand, and go and talk to somebody there and get started. If you're watching this, you're not actually at conference, you can go to the website and sign up there. But I mean, my overarching bit of advice is take the first step and take it today.
Well said. Thank you. Nat, what would you suggest?
Well, I would obviously completely agree about, you know, going for it. I think the other thing is, remember, people have been there before. We've all had to start our journey. We've all had completely different experiences. There are lots of us out there who have kind of taken those steps, and we all will be available to give advice, to help and talk. So, you know, you're not on your own. You know, you can be a trailblazer too, but there are people around who would be very happy to kind of help, to mentor, to give advice, to make sure that you, you know, have a rewarding experience as we all have.
Thank you very much. I'll leave you with a final thought. If we can do it, you can do it. So please do come forward. If you're interested, just give it a go. Come and talk to any of us and just give it a go. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, audience.
Thank you very much indeed to our panellists. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to hear from you, our party members. So I'm delighted to invite to the stage the following: Joy Morrissey, Jed Dwight, Stephen Mastin, and Donald Eki-Holman. Please join us me on the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, conference. It's wonderful to be here today and to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is fairness. Fairness is something that I have seen demonstrated time and time again within the Conservative Party. As you've just heard from this panel, we have given women the opportunity to succeed. I am someone that is living proof of the Conservative Party putting into actions the words that they say. And I want to use this opportunity to thank Anne Jenkin and Women to Win and our Prime Minister for giving us the opportunity. And I want to thank the MPs along the way who have helped mentor all the young women coming through the party. I want to thank Stephen Hammond and Angie Bray, and Guy Upperman, and those countless individuals who have invested in us over the years. And talking about fairness today, what I want to address is the fairness of being able to stand up for conservative values. And what I see so many times in the media is that we as a country and we as a party have to apologize for being conservative, for voting conservative, for being proud of conservative values. And I want to speak about the fairness of standing up for the silent majority in this country. The silent majority who vote conservative but are afraid to put a poster in their window because of what Labour may do. I want to stand up for the millions of people who believe in conservative value of hope, aspiration, and social mobility, of home ownership, of low taxation, and believing for a better tomorrow. I want to walk away from this conference with a vision for the future of a party that not only empowers women, empowers a working mother immigrant who came here with nothing, a party that has given me every opportunity. And I want to speak for all those that believe in conservative values. And I want this party to be a party that is not for the few, not for the many, but a party that is for everyone who believes in the conservative values of hope, aspiration, and social mobility. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to all of you this afternoon. As the son of a lorry driver and coming from a working class Labour voting background, it seems unfathomable to many that I'm stood on this stage addressing the Conservative Party conference. However, my Conservative story, driven by my passion for fairness and equality, has seen me campaign for the Conservative cause since my early teens, get elected as a councillor for the first time at the age of 18, and work for two amazing female Conservative members of Parliament. All of the Conservatives that I've had the pleasure to work alongside during that time have campaigned to make the lives of others better. Few people exemplify this more than the Prime Minister, and it is on one of the burning injustices that the Prime Minister spoke about on the doorsteps of 10 Downing Street in July 2016 that I wish to speak about briefly today. 5 years ago, my older brother Daniel took his own life. Like so many, this came completely without warning and shook my family to its core. In the months and years that followed, in part thanks to the incredible work of the Conservatives in government, as well as the consistent determination of mental health charities, There has been a significant decrease in male suicide in the UK, with the male suicide rate at its lowest level in over 30 years. Nevertheless, in 2017, there were 6,213 suicides in the UK and Republic of Ireland. Each and every one a tragedy. For this isn't just a figure, but 6,213 people who felt they had no one to speak to, no way of sharing their innermost feelings, and therefore no other option. This has to change. As I've already said, that work has already begun in earnest. Earlier this year, I welcomed the formation of Conservatives for Mental Health, brilliantly spearheaded by Gisela Summers. Conservatives across the country, from the Commons to the Council Chamber, are working to tackle mental ill health. And it's vital that we continue to look at what we can do to make the lives of others better. But we also need to ensure that we recognise our own successes. That includes updating the cross-government suicide prevention strategy and investing £575 million extra into frontline mental health services. Meanwhile, this month the UK will be hosting the Global Mental Health Summit, bringing together leaders from around the world to drive forward global efforts to tackle mental ill health and break the stigma. Having been so personally affected by suicide, I recognise there is more to do. However, given this party's work on this issue, and so many others that are at the very heart of people's everyday lives, I stand before you as somebody that couldn't be prouder to be a Conservative councillor, couldn't be prouder to campaign along Conservatives across this country, and couldn't be prouder to be supporting our Conservative Prime Minister as we all work together to tackle this and all other injustices facing the people of this great nation. Thank you.
Good morning, Conference. We should be proud of what we have achieved for our nation's children in schools. I say this not because I'm a Conservative primarily, but because I'm a state school teacher of 20 years. I'm a history teacher. I'm a history teacher who lived through the Labour culture of strategy after directive after initiative, none of which were seen through to completion. We should shout about our achievements in education. For years, teachers like me were burdened by having to mark coursework, where our children at GCSE were working very hard, but teachers knew that the qualification was discredited. We got rid of this. We reduced that burden for teachers. Then we moved to the exam system. It was so broken that pupils could sit modular exam after modular exam until they banked the grade that they wanted to have. Well, that actually increased the pressure on pupils. We abolished modular exams and we reduced the exam pressure on students. We've made the exams more rigorous so we know we can trust the grades. All of this happened because of the Conservatives. More secondary schools than ever before have the freedoms that independent schools have, since most schools, like the schools I work in, are now academies. We did that. Labour talks about education, but it doesn't get it. Labour's dear leader, last week, suggested that he would introduce into schools the history of the trades union movement, the history of popular protest, and the history of the suffragettes. Well, I know we're not supposed to criticise the dear leader, but you're too late, Jeremy. We introduced that 5 years ago. It's a pity you didn't read the syllabus. But there is more to do. Every child should have access to the best that has been thought and written. Every child, including those in schools that I now work in across East Anglia, in some of the most deprived and disadvantaged areas in our country, should be taught the knowledge that empowers them, the knowledge that those pupils from privileged, advantaged backgrounds take as normal. We want to bring all children into the political and the cultural discourse of the educated. Well, this is happening in parts of the country, but we need to ensure it happens in every classroom, in every school. These children have one chance, and we don't have the luxury to allow experimentation with nutty left-wing ideas that have been discredited and rejected by jurisdictions around the world. Where local education authorities used to make excuses for why a sink school was so sinky, we now have academies where head teachers in tough areas who have a zero-tolerance attitude to low-level disruption, where one child can no longer steal learning time from the rest of the class, and we need to encourage more of that. We can be proud of what we have achieved in education, but we can go further. When the Prime Minister talks about those families who are working hard but just about managing, she knows, and teachers like me know, that those families have children who have one chance for their education. And only the Conservatives can bring that education, because only we trust and empower teachers to teach. Thank you.
Good morning, conference. It is with great pleasure that I am standing here before you today to give my first speech. And believe you me, this is my first conference. And this is quite remarkable. And I feel very honored to have been told to give this speech today. The UK has always been regarded as the conscience of the world. Take it from me. Really, it is regarded as the conscience of the world. This is from standing up to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis during the Second World War to the creation of the United Nations, a platform for discussing the challenges of the world we live in and to garner collaborative efforts to surmount global challenges as they arise. We are constantly helping to create a stronger and fairer world where different people could live and express themselves without prejudice. Whether it is in increasing the safety of mothers during childbirth, to the production or the provision of water and other amenities in every part of the world. Thankfully, we have a government who is constantly supporting this work. And I want to use this opportunity to thank the Department for International Development for much of this work that they do around the world. We might not understand how much change this brings to the lives of lots of people from around the world. But believe me, that is our strength that we have as a country. The strength to be able to make changes around the world that affect the lives of people to live and choose the pathways that they want to. Nothing expresses our national commitment to strength and fairness locally than creating a thriving economy, compassionate family values, and maintainers of law and order. As a country, we need to expand our community-based, ambitiously entrepreneurial economy, one that actively supports independent thinking with collective responsibility for our neighbors, environment, and multicultural habitation. This is because we are a country founded on trade and exploration, but a party rooted in enterprise and fairness. To be a fair country, human capital development via education is very important. Hence, the creation of university placement for underachieving, for people from difficult backgrounds. We've had the largest number of people getting into universities from underprivileged backgrounds in the country, and this is the highest for over a century. And we're incredibly proud that the Conservative Party is the one producing that. When we invest in the development and aspiration of families, we immediately invest in the life of the community, its safety, its growth, cohesion, and inspiration. When the family prospers, the community does too, and by an extension, the country. That way, no one is left behind, and a robust, stronger, fairer, and capable country fit for future generations is assured. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those contributions. Now I'm delighted to introduce the next segment, delivered by the Secretary of State for Justice and Lord Chancellor David Gauke. David was appointed to his current position in January this year, but he's already made significant progress. He's launched a new female offender strategy with a commitment to diverting the most vulnerable women in the criminal justice system away from custody. He announced measures to educate prisoners and set them on the path for employment. Rehabilitation of offenders not only benefits offenders themselves and their families, but also our wider society. It leads to fewer victims and cuts the cost of reoffending to taxpayers, which is currently too high. That's how we build a criminal justice system that is fair to the whole of our society. Jacob Hill will shortly be introducing David. Jacob founded a company called Offploy, which supports businesses that recruit and mentor people with criminal convictions. But before Jacob comes to the stage, I hope you'll join me in watching this video, which I hope you'll agree is very inspirational. Thank you.
I think the number one thing about the criminal justice system is you have to ensure that people who go in once never go in again.
I had quite a rough childhood. My mum was a crack addict and my dad wasn't around. The only father figure I really had was my mum's partner, who was a huge drug taker. He'd take absolutely everything. Because I was always in an environment where there was drugs, all sorts of people drinking around. In 2015, got into a little bit of debt because of selling and taking drugs and needed a way to get out of it. And my way to get out of it was to commit the crime that I actually did, which was a robbery. It was supposed to be quite easy to just, sort of snatch and grab rather than anyone get hurt in the process. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way.
At the age of 19, I was grateful to start my own business, but by 21, I was going to prison for committing an offence. And it was whilst I was in custody where I expected to see violence, anger, hopelessness from people because of what I've seen in the films, that I was shocked and surprised to see that there was actually people determined to turn their life around and move on from past mistakes.
Even if the start in a 10-year sentence, you have to start and think, what am I going to do when I get out? You are going to eventually get out, and you do need to do something with your life when you do get out.
So it's crucially important for prisoners to develop skills and education so they can get a job on release. And we know that the way that we get someone to be much less likely to reoffend is about them having a purpose, as well as a place, as well as people.
Most times, prisoners can't read and write properly, so they can't go out and apply for jobs. We need to sort that out when they're. So ending reoffending isn't just about telling them to stop doing it, it's about changing their lives so that they can go out and then change their own lives.
We need to be responsible and be rehabilitating those people going into custody because they are going to be released, they are going to become our neighbours, and we would rather them be contributing members of society than going back to prison. It's encouraging to see that the government have done more with education in custody, or encouraging more education in custody, more employer-specific support, as well as release on temporary licence, where work placements are going, people going from custody out to work for the day, back to custody, and that's incredible in terms of what it provides to a person with a conviction.
Progressing someone's educational and work opportunities will make society safer.
My job is to mentor and support ex-offenders and people who've been through the prison system. Because I've done some bad stuff in my life, I think if I'm able to give a little bit back to people and maybe just help someone down the right path, even if it's one person or 1,000 people, that's me giving a little bit back.
David Gauke's agenda is exactly that. I have been a believer in changing lives forever, and that's what the Conservative Party is about. It's not about stabilising people, it's changing their lives so they can go out and run their lives in a way that is positive to them and never come back into prison. Let's stop people recommitting crime. Let's get them out stable with different lives so they can be solid members of the community. That's what it's all about.
When you hear the word ex-offender, what image does it bring to mind? I always pictured masked men, gangsters, and some of Britain's most horrible people. This was my only understanding of prisons and prisoners until I became one of those people in 2014. Growing up, I had everything I ever wanted. I had every opportunity in life, going from school to college and finally university. It was whilst at university, I saw a need for a festival camping package where you could order everything online, collect it at the festival, and the extra lazy people could have it set up waiting for them. After launching the Lazy Camper, I received a whole host of awards and £300,000 investment. I was even crowned Yorkshire's Young Entrepreneur of the Year, all before I was 21 years old. Yet my sales projections were off, and within months I was folding the company, letting staff go, and amassing more debt than I knew what to do with. I panicked and made a life-altering decision. I made the decision to sell drugs at a music festival. And being arrested is horrible, but no feeling compares to seeing the look on your parents' face when they're picking you up from the police station, especially when it's the same station they themselves have locked so many others up in. You see, my mum is a retired police officer, and my dad is a retired drugs investigator. My act of selfishness not only endangered the lives of others, it devastated my parents, who had their homes raided and found their high-flying son was nothing more than a low-life drug dealer. Yet thankfully, they did not give up on me. They picked me up from the station and picked me up in so many other ways over the coming months until I was rightfully sentenced to 28 months for possession with intent to supply. It was during my time in prison, whilst sewing together 200 pairs of boxer shorts every day, that I met a man called Ryan. He was in there for multiple offences. In fact, he'd spent most of his adult life in prison from the ages of 16 to 28 years old. Compared to my life of love, opportunity and support, Ryan had a lot less. His dad left at a young age. His mum had her own issues. He was kicked out of school and he literally saw no other way in life. This was just his carousel. He did not know the other rides in life's park were also open to him. Ryan inspired me to start Offploy. So we help our ex-offender population develop employer-specific skills, improve their employment opportunities, but most importantly, we help them understand that, and believe that they are good enough to get and hold down a job, and they can, often for the first time in their life, contribute back to society. Offploy supports businesses through a 4-step process to understand people with criminal convictions, find great talent, retain it, and then report on the incredible social impact that this will have on society. Employment reduces reoffending, and a reduction in reoffending makes society safer. 99% of people will one day be released from prison. They'll become our neighbours. They'll become the friendly voice on the phone when you need technical support. They'll become the people who serve you on your Saturday shop, and they'll become the people who lay down the foundation on your homes. Prison and sentencing needs to be about rehabilitation, putting education and employment at the heart of this, as set out in the recent education and employment strategy, is a big step in the right direction. With the support of people who believed in me on my release, this year we will place 100 people into employment. We're now a team of 13 team members. 6 of us have been to prison, and I'm proud to announce today that we have just registered as a national living wage employer so that our peer mentors can develop their own futures with a decent income. But there's more to be done. It's our vision to reduce reoffending and make society safer by placing people with criminal convictions into meaningful, mentored and sustainable employment. I hope my journey today urges you to consider someone's character in giving them a job, not just his or her conviction. Thank you very much. And now, please welcome Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor David Gauke. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good, Jacob. That was brilliant. Well done. It was an enormous privilege earlier this year to be appointed Secretary of State for Justice and Lord Chancellor. I'm the first solicitor to be Lord Chancellor. I'm also the first Lord Chancellor from my hometown of Ipswich since Cardinal Wolsey in the 16th century. Now, admittedly, it didn't end well for him. But then again, he had to undertake a very complex negotiation with a supranational European bureaucracy. Glad I don't have to do that. Being Justice Secretary is such an honour because of the type of country we are. We are a country governed by the rule of law. We value the role played by our independent judges. Our individual liberty and our economic prosperity are reliant upon the fact that that is the type of country we have long been, and that must continue to be the case. Now, this shouldn't need saying, but when a shadow cabinet minister celebrates the law-breaking militant tendency council that brought Liverpool to its knees, and a Labour MP calls for an illegal general strike, and in response the shadow Justice Secretary stands up and claps, we need to make the case for mainstream values and the rule of law. Now, fortunately, I have an excellent team working with me to fight for these values. And I'd like to thank my ministerial team, Rory Stewart, Edward Arger, and Lucy Fraser, for the fantastic work that they do. And our whip, Amanda Milling, and PPSs, Peter Heaton-Jones and Ranil Yarawadna, provide fantastic support in the House of Commons. And in the Lords, we have an outstanding team in Richard Keane as our spokesman and Charlotte Veer as whip. Thank you all. I'm also deeply grateful to the dedicated people who serve our justice system, whether in the courtroom or on the prison landing, for what you do. Whether it be prosecuting or defending the accused, supporting victims, protecting the public, or rehabilitating an offender, our country depends upon you. Thank you. Now, we were just fortunate enough to hear from Jacob, who travelled here today to share his story with us in person. We also saw on the video Ben, who had a really rough life, ended up in prison, and then with the help from Jacob and others, turned his life around. Also, we heard from Natasha Porter from Unlocked, talking about their great work attracting top talent and demonstrating the real values that prison officers bring to their roles. And of course, I'd like to pay tribute to Ian Duncan Smith, who has long been an advocate for social justice and reform. Now, we want everyone to have the opportunity of a good life, and that means being able to go about their lives free from crime. Jacob and Ben both ended up in prison, despite their different backgrounds, and both of them had a choice when they were released: return to crime or contribute to society as law-abiding citizens. We need offenders to make the right choice, to reject a life of criminality and take the opportunity to work, accept responsibility, and be part of society. Reforming the way that we get offenders to do that is my mission, and what I hope defines me as Justice Secretary. Getting prisoners rehabilitated will reduce crime and ensure there are fewer victims of crime in future. It will also cut the £15 billion cost that reoffending has on society. But to do that, we also need to deal with some very real challenges facing the prison system. That's why this summer we announced £40 million to tackle the violence in prisons that is fueled by the drugs trade and fight the use of illicit mobile phones by gangsters on the inside. We have increased prison officer numbers by 3,500, and we will continue to recruit more. And to further crack down on drugs and violence in prison, this month we are launching a new financial crime unit which will track and seize the money that criminal kingpins use to deal drugs in prison. My message to them is this: we are already blocking your phones, putting you in isolation, and now we will make sure you can't access your money. Dealing drugs in prison will no longer be profitable because we will find your assets and we will seize them. Our criminal justice system must protect the public and punish offenders. But if we want to bring down crime, we must also reduce reoffending. That is why I launched the Education and Employment Strategy, which will expand opportunities for offenders to get education and skills training and work experience so they can get a job when they get out. Today, I can announce that we have successfully opened up the market for prison education, increasing the number of potential providers from 4 to 12. We are systemizing offender training and employment in prison industries, such as cooking, cleaning, and maintenance across the prison estate. This builds on the success of the approach within custody and community, which we have developed with organizations such as the Clink charity. And we have agreed a formal partnership with the construction industry, led by CITB and Lend-Lease, to fill skills gaps in industry and help more prisoners do a working day during their sentence and find work on release. To further cut reoffending, we've set out our female offender strategy, using alternatives to custody where this is more effective, and providing better support to many women offenders who are themselves victims of abuse and suffering from addiction or mental health issues. We've launched pilots to make greater use of community treatment orders that address the mental health issues or substance abuse that drives someone to criminality. And we're making it easier for prisoners to keep in contact with their families by allowing access to number-restricted in-cell telephones. And it's because we want to cut reoffending that we have made the case that for minor crimes, custody should only be used as a last resort. Reoffending rates for those on short sentences are higher than for the community alternatives. Short sentences are disruptive. Offenders too often lose their jobs, lose their homes, and damage their family relationships. They are more likely to commit crimes on release. Now, I know there will be some who argue that this focus on alternatives to custody and rehabilitation is just soft justice. But I'll tell you this: if you've just been a victim of a crime, you're not going to take much comfort from the fact that the perpetrator had just spent the last 3 months locked up for most of the day and was released last week with no job, no home, no hope, and no chance. Now, let me be clear that our community sentences should not be a soft option. And that's why this summer I announced an extra £22 million per year to improve our offender supervision after they leave prison, as well as help them transition into work. Now, as a Conservative, I want everyone to reach their potential. And when I meet ex-offenders like Ben and Jacob, who have taken responsibility who have addressed their problems, learnt the lessons and turned their lives around, I am filled with optimism and a belief that we can do much more. We have a duty to help turn around the lives of those who accept their responsibilities and do the right thing, not just for their sakes, but for the sake of society as a whole, to reduce reoffending, to reduce the number of victims in the future. And that's why we have to give them the opportunity to reform. Now, this is especially true for young offenders. We need to ensure that we focus on turning lives round at an early stage before it is too late. And that's why we're improving the skills and training for those working in the youth justice system, including getting more graduates into the system by expanding the excellent Unlocked scheme, and giving governors greater flexibility as to how they commission youth education contracts. And today I can confirm that we are spending £5 million to introduce this country's first secure school in Medway. Secure schools are a radical new concept that places education and healthcare at the very heart of youth custody. They will be run by not-for-profit academy trusts, bringing genuine expertise, knowledge and innovation into the youth custody sector. We'll be launching the application and selection process for the provider later this month. And we intend to construct more purpose-built secure schools in the coming years to further transform the youth estate. Now, together, this package of reforms and investment will crack down on the drugs and violence in prison, further support offenders in turning their backs on crime, and crucially, help young offenders find a path out of criminality into education and responsibility. The problems won't be solved overnight, but if we refuse to be deflected, if we stay focused on our vision, if we are driven by the evidence and prepared to be bold, if we are willing to embrace reform, this is an agenda that can turn round lives. And this is what we will deliver. Thank you very much.
Conference. Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to be able to stand at this platform today and introduce our next speaker. Like all of you here, I am here because I want to make a difference. I want to make Britain better. I want to deliver on that promise of one nation conservatism, an idea espoused by that great Tory and arguably Britain's first Jewish Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. To help create one nation and opportunities for all, three things need to happen, in my opinion. Firstly, we need to ensure that all our citizens are safe and secure. That is the first and primary responsibility of government. If we can encourage our police forces to work better with the local communities that they police, we can reduce crime. An old friend of mine, some of you may know, former Met Police Commander John Greaves, CBE QPM. He always said to me, Dwayne, it is the public that made me the great detective I was. I never solved any crimes without the help of the public. So it's incumbent on us that we help build those relationships. Secondly, we need to create an atmosphere that encourages those who can do provide opportunities for others in a way that builds confidence, encourages entrepreneurship, and prepares us for the fourth industrial revolution. Lastly, Britain has changed. We are a more inclusive, more accepting, and an increasingly united society where we respect the differences amongst us, but we also champion the values we all share. As a party in government that governs for all, we need to implement policies that protect our vulnerable, support our youth, and ensure that every single one of us has the opportunity to get on in life, regardless of skin color, race, or creed. Opportunity being the theme of this conference is at the core of our Conservative identity. We were the first party to have a Jewish Prime Minister, a female Prime Minister, and now we have the first black candidate for London Mayor, Mr. Sean Bailey. Yeah. Conference. So it's fitting that I am here to introduce someone who has made history as proof of that continual opportunity. Someone who has seized every opportunity given to him and is now focused on creating opportunities for others. The first holder of a great office of state from a minority ethnic background. Conference, I make way. Please give a warm welcome to Sajid Javid, our Home Secretary.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Conference, for that warm welcome. It's a huge privilege for me to stand here as Home Secretary. Now, I know the question that's on your mind, so let's just deal with it now, up front. Yes, I did watch The Bodyguard. No, it wasn't very realistic. For a start, my code name is not Lavender. And she didn't even do the power stance. But let me tell you another story. A story which started in the 1960s. Abdul Ghani Javid left Pakistan and landed in Heathrow. He spent what little he had on a coach ticket and spent his first night right here in Birmingham. Then he continued up north to Lancashire to find work on a cotton mill. After standing outside that mill for weeks, he got that first job, and then he started a family. Eventually, there were 7 of us living in a 2-bedroom flat on what the papers called Britain's most dangerous street. That's my story. And if you had told me then what I would be doing now, I would tell you it's less believable than any TV drama. That makes me so proud, not just for myself and my family, but for my country. So, what does the Conservative Party have to offer a son of an immigrant kid from a working-class background from Rochdale? You made him Home Secretary. Now, this new challenge is something that I'm giving absolutely everything to. So I'm especially grateful to have one of the best ministerial teams. We've got Caroline Noakes, Ben Wallace, Nick Hood, Victoria Atkins, and Susan Williams. And it's backed up by a fantastic parliamentary team: Simon Hall, Rachel McLean, Paul Masterton, Paul Maynard, and Zahida Manzour. So thank you to my whole team at the Home Office. There's something profound about that word, home. Most of my counterparts around the world, they run ministries of the interior. Interior ministry. It's got a cold and brittle feel around it. Home is where you feel safe, comfortable, and in control. It reflects your identity and your values, and it's your base for going out into the wider world. That's exactly the kind of place we want the UK to be. Here's the pledge of this party. Britain, a home for all its citizens. Together we will build a stronger home. Now, beyond Britain, outside our home, the winds of division and extremism are blowing strong. All over the world, we are seeing an appeal being made to intolerance, to closed societies, to aggressive nationalism, to autocracy. Well, not here, not in conservative Britain. It might not always feel like it, but our mainstream values and our cultural values, they unite us all. We are, and we will continue to be, the home of rule of law, of civil liberties, of firm but fair immigration, of racial equality, and of respect for every one of our citizens. We will fight fear with optimism, prejudice with tolerance. We will fight fight against hate with hope. That is our kind of conservatism. We choose the path of modern Britain, tolerant Britain, global Britain. Now, that is the opportunity and the challenge that leaving the European Union represents. And to meet our best potential, we need to bring the country together. The worst way to do that would be to backtrack on the referendum result. If Brexit feels like a dividing line now, just imagine what it would feel like if we didn't follow through on the result of the referendum. There's something very liberal Democrat about saying, now that referendum was a total nightmare, so let's have another one. So we all agreed to honour the result. So let's get on with it. No second guessing, no best of three. One vote, one mandate, one nation moving forwards together. Now, this is a time to reaffirm our identity and our values as a country, to renew our sense of citizenship, what it means, who is it for, what is it part of, and to do whatever we can to protect our society and its values in the years to come. So, I want to talk to you today about how we keep our home safe, how we should and will continue to welcome people into our home, and how we will make sure that our rules and values are upheld for the good of everyone. We are going to get these things right. We are going to heal those divisions, and we will build that stronger home. The first duty of government is keeping our nation and our people safe. So security underpins our liberty and our prosperity. Last year, we experienced 5 terror attacks on British soil. This year, we've seen a brazen attack in Salisbury by a hostile state. For every successful attempt that makes our news headlines, many other plots are disrupted, many cyber attacks are neutralized, Many journeys to radicalization are cut short. I've been deeply impressed by the smart and committed people who spend their careers protecting us. And I want to pay tribute to both Amber Rudd and the Prime Minister. What dedication, firmness, and integrity they brought to this role. They deserve our profound thanks. But I'd like to add something else. Something that's a little uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. Not all threats come from outside. Anything that undermines our response to threats is a threat itself. Imagine having someone in number 10 who has voted against vital counter-terrorism legislation. Someone who refuses to condemn the Kremlin over an attack on our soil. Someone who seriously suggested sending a nerve agent sample to Vladimir Putin so that the Russians could tell us what it was. Who compare the actions of the US military, our closest ally, to Daesh. Who voted against banning Al-Qaeda. This is the truth. These are the facts. And on these facts alone, Jeremy Corbyn is a threat to our national security. Let me tell you something else. This isn't a party political point, because a vast number of Labour MPs know this is right. If Mr. Corbyn were ever to be Prime Minister, this behaviour, it wouldn't just be naive, it wouldn't just be misguided, it would be downright dangerous, and it is our duty to stop him. Keeping our liberal, tolerant democracy safe is about more than just national security. Threats to our law-abiding society are evolving quickly. We must evolve with them, and we must step up our own response. Online, there are new threats to our cybersecurity and to keeping our children safe. I won't flinch from responding to these challenges, and that includes standing up to the tech giants and demanding that they take their responsibility seriously. And they should be in no doubt. We will legislate. How we legislate will be influenced by the actions that they choose to take now. Offline, the scandal of child grooming gangs is one of the most shocking state failures that I can remember. And I will not let cultural or political sensitivities get in the way of understanding the problem and doing something about it. It is a statement of fact, a fact that both saddens and angers me, that most of the men in recent high-profile gang convictions have had Pakistani heritage. This behavior is a disgrace to that heritage. So I've instructed my officials to look into this unflinchingly, and where the evidence suggests that there are certain cultural factors driving this, I will not hesitate to act. Now, just as there is damage in insensitive words or actions, these cases have shown the cost of being oversensitive, as well as the awful cost to victims. If problems like this are left unchecked, they will also give fuel to those who want to stoke division between our communities. This is how the seeds of destructive populism are sown, and I'm in a position to deal with this confidently, and I will. Those who break the law, They undermine the foundations of our home. That's why Conservatives will always be the party of law and order. I know that some people are starting to feel a sense that law enforcement is becoming too detached from day-to-day crime, too distant from some of our rural areas. Faced with increasing demands and finite resources, our police forces do a fantastic job, and I will always support them. The rise in serious violence in London and our other cities is especially worrying. There's no time for sitting around when young people are dying on our streets. We need to bring everything and everyone to bear on this. Through our serious violence strategy, we have already brought together all the key parts of government, law enforcement, and society. And now we will do more. We will take steps to introduce a new statutory duty for all agencies to tackle this problem together. That means those in health, education, social services, local government, housing, the whole lot. I'm also pleased to announce today a new £200 million endowment fund that will target young people at the risk of starting a life of crime and violence. We know that one of the causes of the rise in serious violence is changes in the market for illegal drugs. We need a much better understanding of who the drug users are, what they take, how often they take it, and so much more. So I will launch a major review of the market for illegal drugs. And armed with this evidence, I will step up that fight against drugs and gangs that prey on our children. Because on my watch, illegal drug use will never be tolerated. It's fundamental to our sense of security that the homes and streets that we live in feel safe. I do have a confession to make, though. It's a confession I had to share with the Police Federation. When I was younger, I was in a gang of two. It involved me and my brother Bass. I was 11 and he was 9. We were called the Crime Busters. Our mission was to find crime and stop it. Our equipment, 2 knackered old bikes and 2 cheapo walkie-talkies. Now, years later, my little brother is still a crime buster, only this time for real. He's a chief superintendent right here in the West Midlands, and I'm so, so proud of him. And I also know that we are all very grateful to West Midlands Police and all the supporting forces for keeping us safe here at conference. So you can believe me when I say I will be the champion of giving the police the tools and the protection they need to do their job. We must trust our police to do that job. They are the enforcers of the rules. If those rules break down, then so does that sense of fairness, mutual trust, and security. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter where you're from. In Britain, everybody plays by the same rules because we all share the same home. Sometimes you have to be tough in enforcing shared rules. But being strong and safe doesn't have to mean being closed and unwelcoming. We are so lucky to live in an open and welcoming society. And I'm proud of the welcome we give to people from other countries. And that openness to the world has helped us to thrive. If you look at some countries across Europe, populist, nationalist, even outright racist parties have won seats. Not here. We see people from diverse backgrounds succeeding in all walks of life and in all levels. This progress is happening in our politics too. That requires role models and pioneers. people on all sides, including people that we wouldn't normally praise in our party conference. People like Diane Abbott. Yes, Diane Abbott. We might disagree with the Shadow Home Secretary on almost all her policies, but it takes guts and determination to be the first black woman to be elected to the House and Commons, and we should pay tribute to that. As Conservatives, we focus on not where you're from, but where you can go. We believe in opportunity for all. We believe in respect for all. And I mean all. Every individual and every community must feel safe to live their lives in our society. But at this moment, this is not true. This is something I never expected to say in 21st century Britain. It is deeply shocking to see an entire community, our Jewish community, united in their fears and concerns about a major political party. And to see that party, especially its leader, repeatedly failing to respond to those concerns with the seriousness that's required. This party will root out anti-Semitism whenever and wherever we find it. Anti-Muslim prejudice is also completely unacceptable. It is a prejudice that sometimes turns into violence. And I know from family and friends that people in the Muslim community need reassurance, and we stand with them too. Together, for all our citizens, we will build a stronger home. This is my view of what it means to be British. Following the decision to leave the EU, we have both the need and the opportunity to define our country once more, to define ourselves at home and abroad. So I want to talk to you about our shared British values and what we should be as a country. Because at its best, Britain is open, welcoming, and tolerant. But Britain also has high expectations, too, of the behaviours and the standards and values that we are all proud of. I stand before you as the first Home Secretary in a generation that is actually able to define an immigration system without being constrained by the EU. This is an incredible opportunity, and it falls to us to ensure that these rules, they're not just some kind of technocratic exercise, but they are an expression of our values, our British values. We shouldn't brush aside the legitimate concerns that many people, most people, have had about the way that immigration has been managed, especially the anxieties of people on low pay or low-paid jobs. The irresponsible way that Labour increased immigration without any real mandate, which has understandably undermined the public's trust. They lost faith that politicians will manage immigration sustainably. But that doesn't have to mean that they are hostile to individuals, because they're not. Just look at their reaction to the difficulties faced by Afghan interpreters who helped our troops. Or Caribbean families who started coming here in the 1950s. When the British public cries out for decency, they're usually right. The Windrush scandal was a public policy failure many years in the making. These were people who rightfully settled here from the Commonwealth decades ago and became pillars of our communities. The way the system has been treating them over many years deeply offended our sense of fairness. So we are doing everything to put it right. Our eyes were opened to in a different way by the tragedy at Grenfell. That fire affected a truly diverse community of residents. For me, even responding to it was the most moving and harrowing experience of my life. And it laid bare how some of the communities have not been given the same standards and opportunities that we all expect. And we have to put that right too. But there is a wider, more positive story here. It is my strong belief that immigration has been good for Britain. We have adopted many of the best bits of other countries. It has made us a global hub for culture, for business, for travel. It has broadened our horizons and boosted our economy in so many ways. It has made our home stronger. And after Brexit, we still need it to stay strong and prosperous. We want to welcome people to this country. And I say to those EU citizens who have already made the UK their home, you have benefited our country. You are part of our country, part of many of our families, part of our home. So let me be very clear. Deal or no deal, we want you to stay, we need you to stay, you can stay. Thanks to the referendum, we now have a unique opportunity to reshape our immigration system for the future. A skills-based, single system that is opened up to talent from across the world. A system that doesn't discriminate between any one region or any one country. A system based on merit that judges people not by where they are from, but what they can do. What people want and what they will get is control of our own immigration system, with a lower and sustainable level of net migration. And above all, that has to mean one thing: an end to freedom of movement. A safe home, an open, welcoming, tolerant home. And finally, a home of shared values. A home where all the different residents and guests, they come together under one roof, with one common set of values to live by for everyone's benefit and comfort. We welcome newcomers. In turn, we expect them to live by our British values. And it is only right that we make it clear to all new citizens what we are for and what we are against. The existing life in the UK test for new citizens is not enough. Maybe it is helpful to know the name of Henry VIII's sixth wife. But far more important to me is that you also understand the liberal, democratic values that bind our society together. Citizenship is a lot more than just being able to win a pub quiz. So we need to make it a British values test, and that's exactly what I will bring in. It's about signing up to those values, the values that we all share and live by together. It's about starting as you mean to go on. It's about integration, not segregation. And I'm determined to break down barriers to integration whenever I find them. Take, for example, the most basic barrier of all: language. When I was community secretary, we found that over 700,000 people in the UK cannot even speak a basic level of English. 700,000. How can we possibly make a common home together if we can't even communicate with each other? That's why I created a new Integrated Communities Fund to work with people already in our country. And now, as Home Secretary, I will apply these principles to those who arrive in our country. So not only will there be a new values test, but we will also strengthen the English language requirements for all new citizens. Getting integration right also means breaking down barriers to our values. I think especially of those oppressive medieval practices that affect women. Things like forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and so-called honor-based violence. We already have some of the toughest laws in the world against these crimes, but we need to do more. So we will consult on making it a mandatory duty for professionals to report forced marriage whenever they come across it. And when women have the courage to come forward and inform us that they have been forced to sponsor a spousal visa against their will, we will not only protect their anonymity, but we will also do everything we can to deny and revoke that visa. It is not liberal to stay silent about illiberal practices. That's just weakness. If we see people undermining our values and we don't do anything about it, we undermine those values still further. We cannot allow that, and we will not allow that. And we will not stand back when some people go absolutely against everything we stand for. If you leave our home and you go abroad to join Daesh or some other terrorist group, you are rejecting our values and endangering our security. That's why in the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Bill, we will introduce a new designated area offence. This gives the Home Secretary the power to criminalize travel to terrorist hotspots like Daesh's so-called caliphate. You have to have a damn good reason to go somewhere like that, and if you don't, we will prosecute you. And if you are actively engaged in fighting for these groups, you should also know that you are putting your citizenship at risk. The Home Secretary has the power to strip dual citizens of their British citizenship. It is a power used for extreme and exceptional cases. It should, of course, be used with great care and discretion, but also determination. In recent years, we have exercised this power for terrorists who are a threat to our country. Now, for the first time, I will apply this power to some of those who have been convicted of the most grave criminal offences. And this applies to some of the despicable men involved in gang-based child sexual exploitation. So my message to the very worst criminals is clear. If you grossly abuse the laws of this country, you will no longer be welcome in our home. It is when we're comfortable with our own security, identity, and values that we are also comfortable being open with others, whether at home or abroad. That means building that safe home, that tolerant and welcoming home, that home where everyone plays by the same rules. We are the party that can make this happen, driven by a patriotic belief in what this country is about and what we are capable of, proud of who we are, proud of what we do, and proud of where we're going. I speak with feeling about this country because for my family, Britain was a choice. They came here for freedom, security, opportunity, and prosperity. It is because of these strengths that I have always been an optimist about Britain's future. And now it is my duty as their son and as a child of this country to help secure for this generation and for future generations all of the things that make this country a beacon for the world. Together, we will build that stronger home.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Thank you.